Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to the latest instalment of the CarpFix Live. Now, the main purpose of these live interactive feeds is to answer you, the members' questions. So, in a minute, I'm going to have a little waffle on about what I've been up to recently, our recent films, and what's coming up and whatnot. But while I'm doing that, get your questions in. Anything about carp fishing, anything seasonal, anything rigs, anything about baits, anything to do with carp fishing that you want to know, we're here to help. So, Scott, what have you been up to? Anything?
I've been all over the place.
What have you been doing?
In the last month, well, since in start of June, I've been to Denmark, Belgium, maybe I've been in France, can't remember. But I went Denmark with Corda, with Dan. Yeah. That was good. Not a CarpFix film. But I did that, and then I went to... Where did I go after that? What did we do
Derek,
after that? I went to see Derek. I'm sure there was something in between that. Oh, no, I've done the Stokesies filming as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, then went over to Belgium to see Derek, which was... it was very, very challenging, the Belgium canals, because...
You can't see them.
We could see them. This is the thing. We could see the fish...
Right.
But it was so hot. It was like they weren't even bothered. Like, even on an evening, like, you'd think they'd drift off under the lily pads and have a little bit of food. But we saw like a handful. Yeah. But they just not. Yeah, caught a few bream. Yeah. But they just weren't having it.
Just not the one.
Yeah. But we tried loads of different areas. Like Derek's not, he's getting on a little bit. He's not like a 20-year-old that can go, but he gets about, mate.
Oh, he's fit. He's fit as a fiddle.
He's crazy.
Yeah.
A bit relentless, really. But he put the effort in to try. We didn't spend a lot of time. It was a bit of a short trip. Because we were going to go over to Vasmere and fish there for the whole week, but no fish had come out 2 weeks before we'd been there. Yeah. So we were like, I'll meet you at Vasmere. We'll sleep there for the night, and then we'll go over to the canals and just see if that, if we can. We went onto a few of the stretches on the canals that he, like, are almost his like runs sections. Yeah. You'll know of them, but even there, like, there was quite a few people fishing, but no one was catching fish. No. Like, obviously, it's quite a close knit. Some of the anglers on there.
Yeah, he knows a lot of them, like the locals and whatnot.
If fish get caught, he knows about it, but nothing's getting caught. Right. So we're like, this isn't good. But we got lots of technical stuff and lots of little bits of, like, how to if you go into the canals. Little bit about Vasmere. Obviously a few bream on there. But then the day after I left, he went back to Vasmere because he had a client coming on. Yeah. And he goes and catches one. Yeah, what did he catch? The first, it was 38-pounder. So he did a little bit of footage for me, which we stuck at the end of the film. Right, okay. But it's a shame I wasn't there for it. But it just shows you, like, if you put, if I was there for another couple of days, we would have potentially caught one. But yeah, it wasn't going well. No, but he's one of those. That's fishing. When you're fishing for big carp, you don't catch them every time. He said they're not. He's said it numerous times. They're not easy, those canals. They. Like the conversation we were just having, the fish move around a lot. Yeah. They're especially when it's hot. They're going up to those oxygenated areas around the locks. Anything can disturb them and get them shifting. And you've got also, he says it happens a lot, an angler will come right next to you where you're fishing, because he might be fishing 100 yards up the bank, but because it's narrow, mate, he'll just rock up next to you and just sling his rods out, and then that's your spot gone, Yeah. So I went there, and then we started the filming with Stokesy on the Manor. Yeah. Which I've never been to before, and Ash has been there previously because he filmed when. Oh, was there? Mozza caught it as well. Yeah, he was there to film Mozza, and he'd done a little bit with me at the end of the Corda shoot. Yeah, so we've seen, we've seen this fish numerous times, but Tom, obviously, he wants to try and catch it. And for those of you that aren't aware, Tom is fishing like a little campaign series on the Manor Carp Fishery where the 60-pound fully scaled is, and previously it was my booking, so I had the new moon in June,
then the full moon into July, and then the new moon. I think basically I had a few bookings on the moon for like 5-night sessions. And because I caught it last year, I said to Tom, "Are you interested in any of these weeks?" And he took the 3 weeks, I think, new moon, full moon, new moon, through the summer. So we're covering that for CarpFix, and it got off to a pretty good start, didn't he?
Yeah, we've done 5. I think it's 5 nights, isn't it?
Yeah,
sessions?
so the first session.
Yeah, he's had 16 fish.
That's really good going. Like, I don't know how many he's in there. Like, originally when I first fished there, they were saying sort of maybe as many as 200. But I really don't think that you've probably obviously the drone. You've seen what you've seen
from the Corda underwater filming that they've done on there. Dovey said there was about 80 fish.
Yeah, that could be.
I counted 100.
You saw about 100.
I counted 100 with on the drone. I counted,
and there might
physically
be a few,
went 1, 2.
Right, there's probably a few more as well. So if you said 120.
Yeah, I reckon there's about 120 in there.
Yeah, I think that's and that's a good head. It's only a small lake, isn't it? It's like 3 or 4 acres.
Yeah. So he's catching, approaching 20% of the stock.
And with the big one, hasn't been caught in. Yeah. It hasn't been caught this year. Is that right?
No.
So it's like 7 months.
Long time.
It's a tiny little lake under immense angling pressure. I think he's going to catch it. I think he's going to catch it.
It's one of those lakes that it's not just a hole in the ground that you can just you put your rod out and you catch it. There's loads of variables in the way.
It's extremely weedy.
Yeah.
A lot of features in it. Obviously, there's massive amounts of bait going in because it's an exclusive booking venue. You get people turning up each week. What happens every start to the session? People are looking for spots, and when it's weedy, it takes a bit of time. So it's getting fresh to a foam, and then it's getting filled in. Yeah, and then you've got that rotation. Anglers aren't really getting the chance to learn from session to session, which is one of the biggest things. Yeah, I'm hoping, obviously, as well, Stokesy having it to himself. You've got the moon, which is good. You've got a good time of year. It hasn't been caught, and then you're doing these sessions alone, so the fish are under less angling pressure. Yeah, and from session to session, you're learning spots that when you come back, that you can hit the ground running. So I think he's stacked everything in his favour, and he's doing so far so good. Like 16 fish in your first 5 nighter is that's.
But like straight from the off, he went with an approach that I think you did, where he made a spot in amongst some weed, close to where there was some clear spots, but he went to the effort of making his own spot. Obviously, we filmed all of it, so you'll be able to see how he's done it, what rigs he's putting on this spot, how his rigs change as the spot kind of gets super clear, and just catches the majority of fish, initially off that spot, and then things dry up a little bit, and then he finds other areas. So he
constantly working.
Yeah, you can't just. It's not a cast out and just catch it.
No.
Wish it was, but
it's not hook and duck.
Yeah. So it'll be a really interesting film. Definitely.
Yeah. No, super cool. Super cool.
But if anyone's got you could, if you have a question for Stokesy, you could put it on here. I'll quickly screenshot it, and we can put it into the film. That might be a nice little idea.
Yeah.
Because we're going back there next week, and then 2 weeks later.
Yeah, cool.
So if you've got a question for Stokesy, put it on here. I'll screenshot it, and then we'll put it into the film.
Cool.
If you're going there, maybe. He can.
When he's finished, he might give you his raps.
Yeah.
When he's finished.
Yeah, his raps, which may be incorrect. Well, they may be correct.
Yeah.
Take them with a pinch of salt, I think. Right. Yeah. Get your questions in.
Yeah. What have I been up to? So,
what have you been up to?
Basically, they closed Burfield it was in May at some point. It was closed for the best part of 3 weeks, and I'd been doing all right, I would say. I've been doing all right before spawning. However, since it's reopened, I don't know exactly how many nights, 'cause I've not been counting, but I reckon I'm going to say it's at least 15. Yeah, 15 nights I've done without a bite, and I haven't really felt close. And it's been tough. Lake's getting really, really weedy. A lot of people sort of dug in, as in when I say dug in, they've like picked a swim that they're going to fish. They're baiting it, and it's sort of they're they want it for themselves, and you're trying to sort of tiptoe around these anglers so that you're not stepping on their toes. But it's a difficult lake, and I don't think anyone, and obviously not everyone's talking, like there's not like a free flow of information, but I do hear tidbits, and the odd fish has been caught. I'm not saying it hasn't done any fish, because it certainly has. There's certainly the odd fish coming out here and there, but I don't think anybody has particularly been doing really well. Just like the odd fish, couple of fish here for each person here and there. So it's been super, super tough. And normally I like to think that I understand why I'm not catching, and I know what's going on, and I know what to do. But I'll be honest, last few sessions I've been at a real loss as to where I'm going wrong. I think the long and short of it is I've been concentrating on where I'd done all right in the spring, and things have changed and evolved. So I'm going to have to have a little rethink and a regroup. But I've got one more session before I've got some work for Corda. And then I've got a lot of filming in August for CarpFix, and got family holiday. So, yeah, basically I've got 1 or 2 more trips before the autumn. So, yeah, all things will change. The summer's been awful. Spring was all right. So maybe, hopefully, I can turn it around in September or so. The thing is, it could come out at any minute. It's 4 years uncaught at this period in time. But it just, apparently it's been seen. There's talk about among a few people that have said they've seen it. I've not personally clapped eyes on it.
What would you do if you do see it? Obviously,
nothing. I'll probably just fucking shit myself.
That's what I mean.
The thing is, just seeing it doesn't mean you're going to catch it.
No. But you'd be like, okay, it's still alive.
Yeah, well, I sort of believe.
Do you think it is?
Yeah, because other people are saying they're seeing it, and people that have been there. You got the likes of George Benos, who's a really, really good angler. Been there, I think, 8 years fishing it. I think he said on the Corda podcast that he's had like a couple of 100 bites over those 8 years. If he didn't think it was there, he's there for the last piece in the puzzle. Really, I'm sure if he caught it, it'd be like relieved to move on and fish elsewhere, because it obviously gets a bit monotonous, doesn't it, when you're grinding like that. So if these guys believe it's still there, people are saying they've seen it, I believe it's still there. It's always been a difficult fish to catch. It's, people talk about Burfield as like the Everest of the UK carp scene, and the lake itself is bloody difficult. But Stokesy caught over 100 carp before he caught it. Oz caught over 100 carp. It's not, the lake itself is hard, but that's not what makes Burfield what Burfield is. It's pinning the tail on that donkey, which is like it's so rare. And the reality of it is it averages 2 years between captures, and the quality of the angling pressure, like there's loads of good anglers on there, and as soon as one person has it, everyone else is back to reset mode. It's like, so at the moment I'm not even thinking Burfield Common. I'm just trying to catch fish, I think, like, realistically, I think that until you've caught 100 carp out of there, you certainly can't say you deserve it. I think, I caught 15 or so in 2014, and I've had 9 this year.
Although doing 20 nights and not catching anything, I think that's quite deserving after that. No. I think it is
20 nights.
No, but I mean, like
for a lot of people, that'd be their season. Yeah. But like, of those 20 nights, I can't remember sitting behind my rods many times thinking I might get one here. Like in the spring, there were times like when I caught fish, I was like, I'm on here, as in like I've got half a chance. Whereas since it's restarted, since spawning, I've just been like, I feel like I've been pissing in the wind. And I'm watching how the other guys are fishing. A lot of them are like heavy bait and weight, and that it's really hard for me to bait and weight until I know I'm in the right spot. Like when I don't know a lake very well, I'm very opportunistic, moving around, like being mobile, fishing for opportunities. But when I'm not seeing opportunities, it's really hard for me to go, I'm just going to pick this swim and throw some bait out, because I don't know enough. I've not seen the summer's roll on. Obviously, I've got Stokesy to speak to, and he's like the oracle of Burfield. The trouble is that he knows loads of people that fish there, and everything's constantly evolving. You think like new swims open up, like swims close or whatever. It's like the rules. One of the things that I think is making it incredibly difficult is that bait boats were allowed. And when you use bait boats, you're fishing for the carp in the most efficient way. As in, like, you've got an echo sounder telling you it's clear. The bait always lands around the rig. You put in no disturbance on the water. And you can obviously fish really far out.
Yeah.
So by fishing really far out and fishing out really far well, you push the carp to the extremities of the lake. And if they've been fished for with that level of efficiency, they're going to be hyper scared, of like they see bait and know it's like Russian roulette. There's no excuses here. I knew it was going to be tough.
Mentally draining as well.
Yeah. It's like, I've been really quiet on social media. You'll have noticed that, because I've just...
Well, you're in the zone.
I'm grinding.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I'm not working hard. Like, I am working hard, but just not getting the results. And you say last year I had a really, really, really good year, but fishing much, much easier waters. When you sprinkle in a few sessions on Grenville and a few sessions on the Manor, and I've got a 5-week session to Orion and a trip to Three Hills and a trip to Gigantica. You've got hundreds of carp there that you caught, whereas I've been pretty much more or less exclusively at Burfield since the beginning of April.
You did have a night. So with Cordy went over. Was it Pashman's you went to?
Yeah. So
What
actually,
did you? What? Because that looked nice.
Yeah, that was super cool.
When was that? That was recently.
Yeah, that was recently. I went to
really nice.
So I've never been to the Alps, and it's the first time that I've filmed with Chris. Obviously, Chris is German. He's like the European marketing manager for Corda, I believe. But he's obviously a very, very good angler as well. And he knows loads of public venues, and he's basically lined up this. It was one of the most beautiful lakes I've ever seen. And as soon as I got there and fished there a little bit, I was like, I could definitely bring the family here. It had like a floating water park in it.
Yeah.
So, and beaches all around it. It's the sort of lake that if it was in England, you wouldn't be allowed to put a fishing line anywhere near it, because of the fear of hooking a swimmer or whatnot. But it was surrounded by mountains, some of them snow-capped, like in this little valley. Loads of people, loads of water sports going on, and seemingly full of fish. And we caught a lot, not loads and loads and loads, and certainly not lots of big uns. The ending is just absolutely priceless. I won't give it away. But the ending of the film is just like the perfect end. We basically called it a day then, or a day early, because it went so well. But yeah, that just shows you what's out there. There was hardly any other anglers there. Obviously, like stupid drive, like 10 hours from Calais. But when you driving that far, although there wasn't big fish, I would drive that far for a family holiday session, because you could bait it up, sleep in a bed and breakfast, come down in the morning, fish for a few hours, because you could do it with light tackle, reel in, put the gear back in the B&B, go and play in the water park all day, have your dinner or whatever, and then come back for the evening, fish out on your bay. It was...
Can you like park up in a camper van or anything like that?
There was a campsite. We were on the campsite just beyond the lake. But the camera guys had a B&B, and me and Chris were in the campsite. But we slept on the lake. But if I was going there with the family, I probably wouldn't session fish it. I'd just a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the evening. Was no engines allowed, which was basically Chris sent me all the info, but I didn't read it thoroughly. And Kev Wyatt was like adamant that he wanted me to take my biggest Raptor, which is a heavy boat, and I thought it's fine because the engine will push it round. But once I had the heaviest boat, and I wasn't allowed to use the engine, and I had these piss poor little oars that were from Chris's other boat, I was just like disabled, man. It was just like it was quite windy because the wind came off the mountains and that. And most of the time, Chris was having to row me out there because I just couldn't do it. But yeah, had a good time. Caught some nice fish. Had a laugh. It was good.
No, it looked nice. I look forward to seeing that one.
Should Should we answer some questions?
Yeah, let's have a look, see what we've got. Dan Slater, feels like it's been ages. How's the month been, fellas? Well, there you go. Hopefully we're giving you a little summary of what we've been up to. Hopefully you've been out fishing and catching a few. Oliver Coppen, hi Darrell, can you give some tips and edges for us weekend anglers on pressured day tickets compared to a low pressured lake? So a few little top tips for pressured day tickets.
Well, like when you go to somewhere like, say, Norton Disney or Linear, it's very easy to have in your mind that you want to fish a certain lake. Like let's just for argument's sake to say you want to go to St John's at Linear, and then you arrive to that lake late on a Friday. You walk round. All of the best swims are taken. You can't see any fish in the open pegs. Now, my advice would be in that situation is don't just fish on a lake because you want to fish it. If you want to succeed, my advice would be to keep walking around like a list of lakes in order of which ones you want to fish, and walk them until you find a good peg free or a situation where there's fish in a swim that's available. Because it's all too easy to drive all the way up there and put yourself in a swim that's got no chance. It's like you can see it's a corner, it's cut off, there's loads of people there, there's no fish, all the fish down the other end or whatnot. And it's the biggest piece of advice or like tip that I could give you is to just fish for an opportunity, not just go in a peg because it's free. It's all too easy to drive that way, set up on a lake that you want to fish but in the wrong swim. So that would be one tip. The other would be to be mobile, as in it's like very easy to just bog in for the night, go straight in your swim, plumb up your spots, spom it up and wait and see what happens. I've done really well at Linear back in the day when I used to do tuitions there. Well, my clients used to do well. We used to just move around the complex casting bags at fish rather than plumb spots and spom it up. We used to just flick bags at jumping carp in empty swims, and on the shorter sessions, and like when you're nipping in between people, that can be a really, really good tactic. So don't think that you just got to turn up, go in the middle and spom it to death, because although that works when you're in the top peg and the fish are there, it's always good to have a bucket of bait in the car to deploy that tactic. But you got to fish to what you see and what the opportunity really needs. So that'd be my top tips for the busy day tickets.
Beautiful.
Weekends.
Hopefully that helps. Richard Lamb, my first live. Welcome, Richard.
Welcome.
It goes downhill. Unfortunately, had all my tackle stolen over Christmas. Insurance paid me next to nothing.
Oh.
Any recommendations of good insurance companies for your tackle?
No. I've like the only time I've ever claimed on insurance for fishing tackle was through my mum's house insurance when I was still living at home in my early 20s. And they paid out quite reasonably. I can't remember what company it was, but I think you'd obviously just have to check on the details of the policy. How much is it old for new? Because absolutely a lot of time they'll give you what the value of it was second hand, which is no good. You need like a new for old policy, and obviously you need a certain limit of cover. Obviously a bait boat itself can cost £3,000, £4,000, £5,000. So you need to know. I think a 5,000 cover would certainly get you back on the bank. Like you'd be able to get whatever you lost. £5,000 would probably cover a lot of it. But if you're one of these guys that's got the best of the best and lots of everything, then you might need £10,000 worth of cover. So my advice would be just check for the old for new policy and what the limit of that is.
Also depends where you're putting it, because I remember when I lived in a house 10 years ago, we didn't have a garage, we just had a shed.
Yeah.
With the AA, it was still insured in the shed. I had to have certain locks on it.
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened if I ever went and needed to get paid out, but I specified what I had.
Yeah.
Because you, like with electronics and stuff over £1,000 with the AA, you can tell them what you've got, so they've got it separately on the thing.
Yeah.
I imagine it'd be very similar. So I told them what I had that was in the shed at the time. And hopefully that would have been covered, but the AA were pretty flexible with it, so it might be worth a look at them. potentially.
Right, okay.
But I think depending on where you've got it, will
obviously that makes a
also-
difference.
Yeah,
like
if you've got
some people's stuff won't be covered in their cars.
No.
And that's if you've got your fishing stuff in your car and you've got visible windows, that's a lot of times thieves are opportunists.
Yeah.
They just drive past, they see the gear like in a car, all they've got to do is smash a window and they've got your stuff. And you hear all the time about sheds getting broken into. Sheds are obviously in certain areas highly likely to get broken into, and garages less so, but still. One of my friends who lives not far from me, he had all of his stuff nicked out of his garage to the point that they took his bait out the freezer, man.
Really?
Yeah, and he lives like a few miles from me, so it can happen at any. I had mine nicked on the lake. When I had my stuff nicked, I had mine nicked at Coninbrook. I wheeled my barrow into a swim, walked off, and then someone ran off with my barrow. I chased them, but
it was in the big carp store.
Yeah, they got away. They got away with me rod bag and whatnot.
Yeah. Again, opportunistic person.
Yeah.
It's like, I love that.
I love that. So, yeah.
Haven't really got a solid answer for recommendations.
No.
But AA, when I have used them in the past for like a shed scenario, they seemed pretty reasonable. And were open. I asked them. I said, "Is this covered in a shed?"
Yeah.
And if you can get it in writing, obviously it'll help. But like Darrell says, make sure you've got it cover from to replace as it was new, not 5 years old.
Yeah.
Because it won't be. You won't get a lot back.
No.
But yeah. Right. Hi Darrell, this is Dan. Hi Darrell and Scott. I'm currently fishing a syndicate where not a lot of fish get caught or show. 12 acres, roughly 200 carp. What would be your approach? So, syndicate, not a lot of fish.
200 fish in 12 acres is quite a good head of carp. That's like a decent head, and they should be pretty findable. In the summertime, like as we are now, the mornings the night. Like from midnight until 9ish in the morning is going to be your most productive time on a lot of lakes. Not all, but on a lot of lakes in the summer, those like early hours of the morning are the best. So if that's the best time to catch them, it's probably the best time to see where they're bubbling, where they're jumping, those sorts of things. But I know what you mean. At this time of year, I've certainly been struggling to find them myself in my own fishing. But on a lake with 200 carp, 12 acres, you just got to be look. If you're looking for fish at the crack of dawn, you might be the odd day go by when you don't see something, but they do jump. They give themselves away when they're feeding. They will be pushing out the water occasionally. You will see bubbling and whatnot. So yeah, I would just really, really focus on trying to locate where the fish are. If it's weedy, plumbing for your clear spots in between your sessions. So like. When you're in a swim, you're going to plumb it, you're going to fish it, you're going to find your spots itself. Take note of that. But also, when you say wind in the heat of the day, a lot of the time in the summer I do that, and I'll spend time plumbing in other empty swims, getting spots and notes for when I find fish in those swims. Because a lot of the time, what happens is you find fish in a swim, and then you cast around too much because you don't know where the spots are, and you scare them off. If you've already done that casting around and you've got your spots logged, this can be a huge, huge edge for when opportunities do arise. But in a nutshell, really focus on locating where they're feeding, finding those spots, getting those wraps, and then just be consistent with your time, because sooner or later you're going to work it out.
Lovely job. Sean Davey. Hi guys. Started on a 90-acre sailing lake, egg box bottom up to 30 foot with steep margins. How would you go about pre-baiting, e.g. amounts of bait per trip, and then when's best to fish on it?
Generally, when I'm fishing a really big lake that I don't know a lot about, I don't bait up until I've got an idea of what's going on. So as I said earlier in this podcast, I fish very opportunistically in the spring. I like to just move around, find fish, cast out to a minimal bait, and try and get bites like that. But as you move into this time of year, hopefully you've got an idea of where they're frequenting. They might have a few areas where they particularly like, and if you can't bait every spot on the lake. You can, one or two is probably your better option to focus on 2 good spots for different conditions. Maybe you've got a spot for one like a prevailing wind where a southwesterly blows, and maybe you've got one for where it blows into a different part of the lake. So pick like 2 spots and then bait them, and obviously it depends on how many nuisance fish are present. If you've got let's say you've got crayfish, say you've got tench, bream, in that situation, you're going to have to put a lot of bait out, maybe some parkles, maybe some tiger nuts, those sort of things. Spoilies are expensive, baits that you can really put volumes out that don't cost loads of money. With regards to amounts, it really does depend on whether there's crays, whether there's bream and tench, what's the bird life activity like. It's really hard to give you a straight answer, but a bucket of parkles, isn't a lot of bait. So like you could easily be pre-baiting with a bucket twice a week on each spot, so like 4 buckets a week, and obviously you can go up from that if you've got masses of nuisance fish. So yeah, I'd pick 2 spots where you've seen fish visit more than once. So if you've got you've seen them in an area a couple of times, and then again at the other end, then just pick them as your spots, and then and fish them after the bait's been out for 3-4 days. And if you start seeing fish elsewhere, then pre-bait somewhere else. Don't just flog a spot to death unless you're absolutely certain it's the one.
Cool. He has said there's bream and tench in there as well, so
It generally is on a big lake like that.
Yeah. Cool. Johnny Lowry, I think. All right, lads, heading to France in August with my son for our first fishing trip in August. Any advice on bait, tactics, rigs, please? 3.2 acres in size, and it varies from 0.5 metre to 2.4 metres in depth. So your typical kind of small-ish.
Yeah. I would definitely take some tiger. When they're going?
August.
Yeah, I would definitely take some tiger nuts. Tiger nuts are a massively underused bait on a lot of venues if they're allowed. Really good bait in the summer months. Very cost effective, and they have especially in coloured water. You'd think a little inert tiger that doesn't really smell of much wouldn't have much attraction, but they're absolutely loaded with natural sugars. Obviously they taint the water in and around them where you put them, and I'm sure the fish can taste the sweetness in the water as they're swimming around, and obviously when they're crunching them, I'm sure it attracts other fish. And on a small lake like that, as soon as they start eating, I'm sure every fish in the lake will start knowing about it. So that would be, and if it's shallow as well, you might encounter some bird issues. Generally in France there isn't too much bird life problems. I can't think of anywhere I've fished in France where the birds have been a real problem. But yeah, I think taking tigers would be your number one sort of alternative. Obviously you can take some boilies, but that'll be your number one alternative thing. And yeah, just enjoy yourself. There's not really I find on those small little lakes, I'm guessing there'll be a couple of swims on there, probably no more than that, a couple of free swims, and I would just look at the swim on day one. If you're allowed to use a boat, get around it. If you can't, have a good lead around in all of the areas, and if you find some nice spots in different swims, put a few kilos of bait or a couple of kilos of tigers or boilies, whatever you're going to use, on different spots. And you can't fish them all at once, so you could start on 3 spots that you think are the ones, but you could have two more spots baited, and if you get 2 nights in without having any action, you can move on to a spot that's had bait sitting on it for 2 days, and that can be a great one. But the other thing would be is not to go mad with the bait. You're going there, there's probably been someone or some people there the week before, and it's very hard when you arrive to know they've been there a week putting bait out. You don't know what's in the water, so yeah, don't go wild with the bait. Like a kilo or 2, or even a few handfuls can be enough, depending on the stock. But don't go in with 10 key drops on day one unless you're confident or the bailiff says this is definitely the way to go. Because there might be a lot of bait lying around. Yeah,
I don't know how old your son is either, but sometimes a little spinning rod or a little whip can also pass time quite nicely if the fishing is tricky. That's a good little thing to do.
And little days when it's red hot as well in the summer, it can be nice just to have a little nip out
You don't need to fish when it's baking hot.
Yeah, I know you think that you need to maximise your time there, but
Yeah,
a week's a
windows,
really long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to say wind in at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, nip out into the town, have a coffee, have some lunch or whatever it is, can just give you that little boost. You know, it's just sitting there lounging can just be you get a bit run down in your swim sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be other stuff to do. Good luck. Ben Sumner, I'm fishing a 6-acre mere and there is about 40 fish in there and they're really, really spooky. How would you attack it?
Obviously, that's quite low stock. You know, it's not like super, super low stock, but, you know, it's when you're talking 40 carp, and let's say on an average, maybe they come out twice a season each. You know, it's only 100. No, it's not. 40 fish twice each. It's only 80 bites, isn't it? It's like 80 bites for the year. Now, when you break that down, 80 bites, most of them come in between April and October, and then you've got to spread them between the members. They never get spread evenly. They get spread between the ones that put the most effort in. And you're going to have to work for each bite. And yeah, my tactics are always the same. I fish opportunistically to start with. When I know nothing, I just look for fish and fish where they are with minimal amounts of bait and try to catch. Whilst I'm doing that, I try and learn some spots, and then once I've got a few spots in mind where when I say I'm looking for spots, I'm looking for areas where the carp frequent, the swims that they seem to visit the most, and the areas within those swims that they tend to like. And once I've got an idea of the swims they like and the spots they like, I then might fish in a little bit more of a static manner, and I try to use baits or baiting tactics that not everyone is using. You know, it's on a lot of lakes the rules are, you know, if you go somewhere where it's like a boiling pellet only, it's very hard to be different. But on lakes where you've got sort of like linear, where you can use whatever you want, you know, most people are just bombing out a munga mix, like a whole different kettle of stuff, you know, and just using exactly the right thing can be the method. And let's say, for example, it was tigers, or let's say, for example, it was 20mm boilies. Once you've worked out what people aren't doing, they might all be doing the right thing. It's not always the case that you just do something different, it's the right thing. You have to do something different well, it has to be the right thing. You can't just be different for the sake of it. But once you zone in on the spots, the areas they like, with the right bait, the next thing is just putting the time in. It's really just working those few things out, getting the right spots, the right areas, using the bait that they want to eat, and then just doing the time. And I know that sounds like rather simple, but everything it's always easy when you know how.
Yeah.
But it's just you've got to find those things. You've got to find the right spots and use the right stuff. And then once you've got that, it is easy.
Beautiful. Beer, Boobs and Techno is back.
He's back.
This evening, evening Carp Ravers. I don't know if we're ravers. I don't think we are.
I don't know. I had the radio on pretty loud on the way here.
Yeah. I'm in the process of setting up my small inflatable 3-man boat to attack the Thames this summer. Rowing, what electronic outboard would you recommend with a £200 budget and a £200 budget for a battery? What would you recommend and why? Also, if you gents fancy hitting the Middle Thames for a change of scenery, then hit me up.
I don't know, I had to read that Corder's doing a bit on the Thames.
I listened to the podcast.
I saw the fish. I didn't see. I've seen the pictures on Instagram, not on the podcast. I listened to it on. Is it Spotify or something?
Yeah, they put it on.
No, it was on a podcast, Apple podcast thing. I listened to it on there. But yeah, I got the buzz listening to that. So so I'm super interested for a bit of that. That'd be cool. But I've sold my boat, so might be a bit crowded on yours, mate. But no, so the question is £200 engine. Thing is, I'm not really up on. You know, I bought a lot of my stuff years ago. There's a company called Haswing, which is the last company that I bought an outboard from. Like when I'm in France on Orient, all the Frenchies, the pike anglers, they all had these Haswings. So I'm guessing they're the best. I had a 5 horsepower one, which is quite an expensive engine, but even a 2 horsepower one would be probably enough. I don't know how big your boat is, but 3 horsepower will probably be enough of the Haswing. But it might. I think it's going to be a little bit more than 200 quid. I do think it is. But you buy it once. If you look after it, the things that really sort of kill the engines is when you drive through weed beds and then just keep going, just like thinking I'm just going to blast through it, where you really just need to prop the engine up, take the weed off, because you're just burning the motor out. It's not meant for bashing through weed and that. So yeah, my advice would be to spend a little bit more on the motor, look after it, don't run it aground, have a spare propeller. And with regards to batteries, I've generally over the years had lead acid batteries, which are the real heavy ones, and I've always bought the biggest ones from Halfords, like 115 amp hours. They're generally about 90 quid. They do weigh a lot, 25 kilos, but if you don't crack them, they're in pretty cheap plastic cases. If you look after them, don't throw them about, always store them fully charged. Never leave them like dead over winter, and never leave them in the garage on a concrete floor over winter. I keep mine in my garage, but I keep them on like wooden shelves on carpet, because if you leave them on ice cold concrete decharged, they won't last 5 minutes. But some of mine I've had for 10 years or more, and I have in recent times spent a little bit more on lithium ones. Like I bought some Fogstar lithium ones, and I've had a few problems, not major, but they've rusted up a little bit. The terminals, the app that allows you to charge them has stopped working. So yeah, I'd probably buy lead, because I've never had any trouble with lead. If you look after them, as in you keep them fully charged, you keep them off the floor, and you don't crack the cases, then they last a very long time. And although they're heavy, I don't want to throw 300 quid at a battery and it not work 18 months later. So I would spend the money on the engine, and I would probably buy lead batteries.
That Carp, I mean, it's miles more expensive, but the Carp Lounge one that I've got that I use for filming for the big batteries, that's got both one of the like little square connector things, but it's also got the normal terminals on it. And to be fair, that one's been we had one problem with it, which they fixed straight away. But other than that battery's been going for. Yeah,
I think the Fogstar ones would be able to be fixed if I sent them back. But I'm the sort of bloke that I just never get round to sending anything back. Like boxing something up and sending it back just seems like. Yeah, I should do it really, because I've got 600 quid for batteries not working at home.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps a little bit, but yeah, if you've got room for one, potentially two, because if you go,
you're not going to get a lithium for 200 quid though, are you?
No, unless you buy it second hand from somewhere.
Yeah. But to be fair, those Fogstar ones, they do a budget one that's really cheap. I think it is 200 quid.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to make sure you fill out the guarantee and you keep it safe and all of that business.
Yeah.
But Haswing for the Outboard.
Yeah, cool. Nick Shaw, evening lads. Hope you're both well. Question for Darrell. I've just bought myself a new bait boat. First time using it next week. Weedy, sandy pit. Any advice? It's one of the Hunter 750s, the one that you used from my one.
The Ridge Monkey?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the Echo Sounder is a brilliant bit of kit, as in like... to be able to send a bait boat out to a spot that you've never seen before and have an idea of not only what you're fishing over, but what you've crossed on the way out there. If you're fishing over weed, if you're fishing over a deep gully, if you're fishing over a shallow raised area. A normal top tip for bait boats would be not to mount in the bait up, because if it's a bait boat water, you notice when you see most people fill a bait boat up, they just fill it up, just scoop it up. Put those bait in. Obviously, those Ridge Monkey ones you won't get a lot of bait in anyway. But like, I think that big pile of bait on a bait boat venue that when it's been seen a lot can be like scary to the carp. They just get used to it and just think, I don't fancy that. And a lot of the time, just a couple of free handfuls can be the best way to go. My top tip will be to put a foam nugget on the hook. I cut the foam nugget down the middle, so it's like a bit of a flap. Lick and stick it, and when I lick and stick it, I don't hold it together really tight. I literally just put the two sides so they just touch around the hook point. And I don't use the foam nugget because I want the rig to kick out. The whole purpose of the foam nugget is to, as you open the hopper doors, for the hook to be able to slide out, because it's very easy for the hook to catch on the hopper door on some bait boats and blunt your hook, especially if you're using really sharpened hooks. So my top tip would be to use a foam nugget. Once you get to your spot, obviously you send it out there, or you're feathering it out there, you stop it when you get to your spot, you check your echo sounder. If the boat's drifting, just make sure you make your adjustments. Like, take your time over dropping it, and when you're ready, once you're ready to drop it, make sure that the line is slack. So like at the last second, once you're really happy, take your finger off of the spool. When you open the hopper door, it will fall straight rather than being yanked back towards you and away from the bait. And once you see the line sort of moving on like away from the spool, just stop the spool, because then the lead will already be out of the boat at that point. And if it's the right depth of water, you can just feel it touch down, and it won't have time to swing away from the boat. So you have to sort of play around with it in different depths to get the timing of it right. But I like to let my rig free fall out of the boat and then trap it so that it lands close to the bait rather than swinging away. And obviously, if you've got too tight a line when you open it, I feel like the rig can shoot backwards, and more chance of catching on the boat, more chance of blunting the hook, more chance of it being nowhere near the bait, and not obviously the boat is telling you on the echo sounder what it's like underneath, and you don't want the rig shooting back towards you too much.
Beautiful. Hopefully that helps. Isaac in Canada. Hello, fellows from Canada. Hope all is well. Any exciting plans for the future? Obviously, we've got Stokesy's films coming out. They're in the future, but also coming
near
out.
Future, aren't they? They're
very near future.
Yeah, you're going to almost like you're going to get the tips and advice for the time of year, aren't you? Which is
straight
one thing.
away, yeah.
But obviously, you're going to be. I like the idea that you're going to know what's happened in the first parts as you're moving into the next one, wondering how he's going to get on, because it's going to be quick fire.
Yeah.
But personally, I've got a trip to Gigantica at the beginning of August, and then I've got a week at Three Islands the week after that. So it's like a week at Gigantica, week off, week at Three Islands. So yeah, that's what I've got a quarter filming trip week after next. It's a match against Dovey and Spooner, me and Dan. So yeah, just a little 48-hour thing, I think. So that's like my near future. But I'm looking forward to the Gigantica session. You know, the stockies in there. Yeah. Obviously, it's coming on. You know, not only is there 105-pound carp swing around in there, but like I've not had many of what you would call the. Well, if you look when you look on the walls in the, I've caught over the years. I look, I've got that one, but there's still like loads of the real big uns. There's something about those big uns in Gigantica. They're
cool.
They're hard to catch, though, aren't they?
Yeah,
you think I've probably done 20 weeks on that lake, and you think if you'd done 20 weeks on there, you'd have had most of them. Yeah, but I haven't. No. You know, and I always go there, and I generally always, but I've had some really good sessions there. Like I've had 20 fish catches a few times. I was listening to Dovey say it in the Quarter podcast. He said he's really due a big one out there. I'm really due a big one out there. Say last summer I done 2 weeks, one for Quarter, one for CarpFix, and one for Dovey's mates trip. And I think I had 16 on the Dovey trip, and I think I had 20 odd on the CarpFix trip. Hang on.
Bless you.
And I caught, I think I had 4 or 5 50, 4 50s, I think. I had 2 50s each week, I think. But there's loads of 50s in there. It's not like catching 2 50s in the week out of Gigantica is not a big deal.
No.
You know, like having 2 60s or 2 70s, that I feel like I need a session like that. So all you can do is keep rolling the dice, keep catching. One thing that I am going to do different this time, and I say it every time and then end up changing my mind, is I've said it lots of times, like if you fish boilies only, then you've got more chance of catching the bigger ones. You'll using spod mix and that, will generate bites, but I do feel that you'll get less using boilies, but more chance of catching a big one. And I always end up veering away from that because you have a couple of slow days and you just want to get the indicators moving.
Yeah.
But this time I'm going to fish with fish meal boilies, probably big ones like 20s, 18s, 20s, and I'm going to fish with the house pellet because I think they get hooked on that as well. Like they've got these big 11mm pellets.
Are they like a boilie pellet or are
no,
they pellet?
They're like a halibut pellet, that sort of thing.
Right.
But they get these lakes where they go in a lot. The fish get tuned to them. Yeah. And one of the sessions in recent times where I did catch a few big uns was when I went with Dan. I started off with like maize, hemp, 10mm essential cell, like bright stuff. And as the week went on, Dan suggested that I just use pellet and boilie, fish meal. And at the back end of the week, I caught a few better fish. And for some reason as well at Gigantic, I feel like, I know you can catch certain fish from certain areas, but as a general rule, a lot of big fish tend to get caught Alamo, Stink, Big Southerly, Coes, like something about that
area, little
that
triangle,
that little area of the lake seems to do a disproportionate amount of big uns. Like most of my recent sessions where I've done really well, I've been on the opposite side of the lake, and I'm wondering if that's why I've had like a disproportionate amount of smaller fish.
Well, you have to try. It's the other side.
We're talking about it. Yeah. It's all big talk until you prove it. Right? But if well, you'll find out soon. We're going there beginning of August. Yeah. And the film will be out shortly after.
Well, that'll be exciting. So that's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Andre has asked, evening, question for Darrell, looking for new rods and reels, Daiwa Emblem 45s, and of course greens. What are the best ones? 12 foot, 4 pound test curve, question mark.
So what's the question? Sorry, you bought some new reels.
Looking for new rods and reels, Daiwa Emblem 45s, and of course quarter Kaizen greens. What are the best ones? So he's already eyed up the Daiwa Emblems by the looks of it.
Right, well I've got the Daiwa Super Spod reel, which the component, like that 45 range, that number 45 is like a shape of reel, like the Super Spod, the Cross Cast, I believe, the Emblem. They're all basically the same chassis or like same shape, and a lot of the components of those reels are interchangeable, so you could change the spools over and whatnot. I'm loving my Spod reels. Like Spod reels are designed to last and be abused. They've got a quicker retrieve, which I just can't think of any reason why you wouldn't have that quicker retrieve. I really like that. They've got the fast clutch on the front of them. So I don't know if the emblems are more expensive or less expensive than the Super Spod reels, but yeah, the Super Spod reels I'm really enjoying using them. And if you're going for the Kaizen greens, did he say 12 foots, did he?
12 foot 4s, yeah.
Yeah, if I was going to go for the 12 foots, I would go for the 4 pounders. I've seen on social media that Tom Maker's been doing, like really enjoying using the 12 foot 6 4 pounders. And I use 13s, I use 12s, and I've just got some 12 foot 6 Spod rods, and I'm starting to feel like I think that is a really good medium. You know, if you like, I know everyone can't afford to have 2 sets of rods, and one of the things that's not great about having 2 sets of rods is you get used to casting one, and then you're constantly changing from one set of rods, so you never really become the master of one set. So I know the 12 foot 6s, you can squeeze them into a 12 foot rod bag, and I think they're a great all-rounder. You know, I really do think that is a great medium, you know, for people that want a rod that does everything. So yeah, if you want 12 footers, go for the 12 foot 4s. But if you fancy a rod that's like got the ability to really cast that bit further, I think the 12 foot 6 4 is a great option.
Beautiful. Ben is asked to fishing a 6 acre mere, and the fish are very, very spooky. Any help? So 6 acre mere, very, very spooky.
Well, the biggest tip is to get your spots logged. You know, spend time when you're not fishing, or even go up there for a session where you're not desperately focused on catching. like with like maybe your first session, your priority can be to move as many times as possible, to lead around in as many swims as possible, get your spots logged, take pictures of the horizon, and then like draw lines on the pictures to show what tree. It's easy to forget. And then in the notes section of your telephone, write down your wraps. And the best thing that you can do on pressured venues is be able to get out as minimally as possible. So that's one thing you can do, is in you can get your spots noted, get as many swims and that plumbed as possible. But the other thing you can do is during your sessions is bait up on a few different swims if you've got the opportunity, it's not too busy. And then like throwing bait out or spomming bait out is obviously makes a lot of noise, a lot of disturbance, and can scare the fish off. So by baiting up at the start of your session in multiple areas, when the fish arrive on those spots, you've only got to go out and flick your rig on top and try and be as discreet as possible with a light lead and do it as quickly and as minimally as possible.
Beautiful. Stephen Richardson has said, have you been to Mavericks Lake, part of Berners Hall? Only opened in March, April.
No, I never heard of it. Where is it?
I've heard of it.
Is it on the same complex?
I think it must be somewhere else because there's only those lakes there.
No, I don't know. No. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about it.
I went onto the Berners Hall booking for the other day just to see the availability, just like for potential filming 2026.
Really?
Nothing.
Maybe we should book some stuff for it in advance.
Absolutely nothing.
Because it's crazy. Like I think we could do like a CarpFix social on Burners, because I think you can book like exclusives.
Yeah.
And I think from a filming point of view, that would work really good. You know, obviously we do the CarpFix socials to Gigantica. We've got some to Road Lake, some to Three Islands. Like a UK one would be a much cheaper option. And we're killing two birds with one stone there. So maybe we'll look into that.
I will ask old Callum.
Yeah.
See what he says.
Yeah.
Lennart has asked, as spawning should be finished now, do you actually think carp can reproduce in European conditions? I barely see small fish swimming about at all. Same at Toiseals when we were there. Cheers from the bank of beautiful German lake in the forest.
Lakes where carp reproduce naturally are seemingly quite few and far between. You know, when I was a kid fishing like muddy ponds, like muddy farm ponds, where you're float fishing for carp that like 1 or 2 pounds, on those sort of lakes they seem to really reproduce well. Like coloured water, if you scoop the landing net through the margins, they'd be full of baby carp. Now, on the big carp lakes that I fished that are crystal clear, I can't think of a time when that's ever happened. Now, so that would tell me that they reproduce best in coloured water. I think what it is, I think carp fry aren't very good at avoiding predators. I think the water temperatures in the UK are probably not the best for it, like really sort of conducive. You know, in America, you think these massive lakes in the St. Lawrence, they're just reproducing like wildfire over there. And I just know that it's quite uncommon in the UK for not uncommon, but like there's lots and lots, and it's more common than not that they don't really reproduce. Certainly not successfully in numbers. And I would just say that I would say it's temperature's probably maybe got something to do with it. The clarity and the predation, they're the biggest factors really.
Cool. Ben is taking his 6-year-old son to Norton next Sunday, looking to get some fish on the bank for an experience for him, thinking Turners. Would you agree? If so, what tips would you suggest? I've just conveniently got the map up of the lakes to remind myself.
I think the best ones when you just want some action. I think Stocks is a great shout. And the reason Stocks is good is because it's got not bundles of open water. It's quite narrow, a lot of it, isn't it? It's like I can see it on the map. It's quite narrow, and that means that the casting isn't long distance, and there's a really good head of fish. So I think Stocks Lake is a really good like for some action. I think Turners is relatively small. Is that right?
Yeah, Turners is a big one. Hodgetts, so the Runs waters, as far as I'm aware, would be Stocks, which we've recently done a film with Rob. Hodgetts is also got probably more fishing. I think it's the most heavily stocked lake.
Right. Okay.
Out of all of them.
Okay.
So Hodgetts could be a good option to definitely get some fish. Stocks has got a lot of fishing, but I think it might be a little bit more tricky, whereas Hodgetts I know will be a bit easier.
Yeah.
And then it would probably go Turners, and then it would go down to like Billy's.
Yeah, Billy's is a good run to what, but I think it does help to cast on there because it's quite a big lake. So if you're comfortable fishing sort of 27 wraps, 28 wraps, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
I think you can do really well on Billy's. But I think the smaller lakes lend them, if you're taking your kid, you don't want to be sitting there spomming all day, do you? You want to be...
No, I think, Stocks is a good option if you, like, along that, like, arm, so to speak, you're just fishing along the
far bank?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But the impression I got when we were there, it was quite early in the year, but they're just going up and down. You can pick them off, whereas on Hodgetts, you could put a good amount of bait out and just get a few bites.
Yeah.
And know that you can hold a few fish.
Yeah.
Whereas in Stocks, you might. I don't know if it's like that. It might be. We went at a different time of year, but if you can't get a decent swim on Stocks, go on Hodgetts or the other way around.
Yeah.
They're your two.
Your two best bets for the takes.
Yeah, Turners is a good option, but it might, if you've got a little one with you, the action might be a little bit slower if you can't get on a decent swim. But that would probably be the third choice anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, just speak to the bailiff.
Yeah, check out the video that Rob's done on the.
We've got loads of
videos on both lakes, haven't you?
Yeah,
you've done a video on one else.
Yeah, Hodgetts. Yeah. We've got videos on every lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you trundle through the archive, there's loads of videos on Norton.
Yeah, just type in Norton Disney in the search bar; they all come up.
Cool.
Right, back to the questions. Where were we? Sean Russell. Good evening, everyone. I have a question about hook holds and if there is such a thing as a perfect hook hold. I seem to hook most carp in the scissors. How should I change this?
Me too. Well, for me, the most important thing about any hook hold is that it stays in, and that's how I'm not overly worried about the exact location of the hook hold. I'm more concerned about how many come to the landing net, and I'm always looking for a 9 out of 10 ratio. That's like, if I'm at 9 out of 10, I'm happy. If it's less than that, I'm concerned, and if I'm getting more than that, then I'm doing really well. And I generally catch most of my fish in the scissors too, and I think the reason for that is if you look at a carp's mouth, it tends to sort of like curl down into the corners, and I think what naturally happens is the hook link falls down into the corner, and then as it tightens, it pulls round into that part of the mouth. Now, I think that's a good place to hook fish because there's no bones in the. There can be like cartilage and bits and pieces there, but there's no actual bones in the scissors. Whereas in the floor, in the bottom lip of a carp, it's actually really bony in places. If you feel around with your thumb, and it's like at times in certain spots, it'd be like trying to drive a hook home into wood. And it's going to be really hard to penetrate. And I think that's how a lot of fish fall off, is in the hook it basically hits hard, doesn't really fully, the gape of the hook doesn't fully seat in like that. And if the hook is like teetering around on the point like that, the skin, the flesh will tear, and then you end up losing the fish. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about hooking them in the scissors. I hope to hook them in the bottom part of the scissors rather than up in the top. If you're hooking them up in the top, it generally means that your hook isn't dropping under your bait. But the textbook hook hold that everyone goes on about is like 1.5 inches back in the middle. Now, that is a good hook hold if it's past the bony bit, but why is it any better than in the scissors? So yeah, I wouldn't worry if it's in the scissors. I think that's good.
Cool. Just a quick shout out to Ash, who's watching. He's had a little arrival. He is now a daddy.
He is.
Congratulations, Ash.
Congratulations,
if you're still watching.
mate.
He'll watch this back anyway, but
yeah,
just a little shout out for him.
Wee.
Let's go down to the next. Where were we? I went right past the a couple of little messages on there. Where were we? we did this hook hold. Daniel, that's where we are. Daniel Venables. Love the Pump House vid, Pecky. It's my first season on there this year. Had three, the first trip, including the Big and Cluster.
Oh dear.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on fishing during an algae bloom, as it's like pea soup at the moment?
I think some lakes can fish really difficult in algae sort of conditions. Some lakes it doesn't seem to bother them. What it generally does is kill, if there's a lot of algae, it will kill the weed because the light won't be able to penetrate. And when the weed dies, quite often what will happen is the fish will really get on the naturals, and there can be a period where it can, I don't know if it's going to happen there because I don't know the lake that well, but it can make the fishing difficult. If there's a lot of natural food suddenly becomes abundant, and the carp will take advantage of that. But on the plus side, once that natural food has been harvested, the lake will be bare, as in there'll be nothing on the bottom, and then in that situation it just makes the fishing that much easier, But yeah, I think the real key thing that I took away from Pump House is it's quite a lot of shallow water in there and limited deeper water, and obviously, although we're in high summer now, very quickly you're going to be into August, and I always find that from the back end of August up until November, they'll start to use the deeper parts of the lake, but maybe into September more so, but like definitely from August onwards towards November, that they'll be looking to be in those deeper areas for feeding, and because there's only a limited amount of that there, it really sort of narrows it down, and having the pump house in one of those areas really is like a key feature. And I think the two swims that I fished in that film, I think like they're obviously two of the best pegs, and then the swims that are on what I would call the road bank, like on the car park side, the deeper water is on the near side, and I think there's a real tendency for people to want to cast across to the reeds on the other side, and it's from what I saw on the drone, it's really shallow over those reeds, and I think that the deeper margin that's along that road bank is probably massively neglected. Now, as I've said, the two best swims, or most productive and the most popular, will be the ones around that pump house. If I was looking to pre-bait, I wouldn't pre-bait those swims, because chances are you're going to be fighting for them with the other members, whereas I think that deeper water that's in front of the road bank swims, massively neglected, and I really think you could get something going in those gullies. If you wanted to bait in between your sessions and always have, like, you could have it as a fallback. Your plan could be to get around the pump house, but because they're popular swims, you might not get them. But to have an area baited, I think that would be my tactic. I'd look to fish around the pump house, but I'd look to bait in that deep gully in front of the road bank, so that I could, when I couldn't get on the best swims, they've got something else to fall on.
Yeah, cool. Tim Carter, I fished in some venues where big beds of bait are advised and clearly work, but aren't you reducing your chances of a bite? It's a fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so venue specific. I would say baiting. What's the word I'm looking for? Bait application is probably my weakest trait as an angler. Like, that's certainly not my strong point. So what's the question exactly? About putting loads of bait out.
Yeah, aren't you reducing your chances of a bite?
Yeah. So if you say you got somewhere like Grenville, where you've got all those carp in there, if you cast single hook baits out there, I don't think you'd catch anywhere near what you do when you put out 20, 30 kilos, because it just hasn't got the pull impact power. And the biggest thing that makes carp make mistakes is the competitive nature of feeding. And if you've got a big head of carp and you can get a lot of carp feeding, you're going to get that many more carp making mistakes picking up the hook bait. Now, there's very few venues where you can put out 20, 30 kilo and it is the going tactic. It's not the norm, is it? So yeah, putting more bait out might initially slow down your chances. Let's say you put 500 boilies out and you put a hook bait. You think that makes it 500 to 1 for you getting a pickup.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work like that. Your hook bait could have a bit of fleck of colour on it. It could be on the right part of the spot that gets the most attention. So the amount of bait is critical. The choice of bait is critical, and you can certainly put too much out that will prolong how long it takes to get a bite. But you can also not have enough bait in the swim to generate competitive feeding. Now, I've caught hundreds of carp on single boilies, cast in amongst jumping fish and whatnot. That's worked really well for me. But like, I've had more multiple hit sessions over bait because I'm creating a banquet. I'm creating a competitive feeding situation. So yeah, I can't give you the answer because every lake is different. Seasons can be different. Areas of the lake can be different. You know, there's so many variables. That's the thing about a lot of questions in carp fishing. You know, it's not like 10 boilies is best, 1 kilos is best, 8 spoms is best. You know, if you look at someone like Tom Maker, he goes to all of like these super well stocked lakes and has numerous smash 'em up sessions where he's hauling. And from what I've gathered, like listening to him, it's very rare that he sets his stall out for the hit, in that it's not like 20 key out, sit back and wait. It generally starts with 10 to 20 spoms on a lot of lakes. 10 to 20 spoms is like the opening line of attack, and then get a few bites and then top up. And I think it's easy to go crazy. I think the same. On a lower stock lake, I found like 6 to 8 spoms on a spot where you think 2, 3, 4 fish might arrive can be a good starting amount. But if you're fishing a big gravel clear spot out in the lake where you're anticipating a lot of fish, then 12 to 20 is a good starting point. And like generally when I'm super confident, like I'm in the right spot, I think the fish are there, it's a good time of year, I'll put out 40. I think 40 spoms. I think there's quite very few situations where you need to put out more than 40 to start with, and I think a lot of the time 10 or 12 is probably enough. A lot of times.
Cool, hopefully that helps. Jack has said, hello, currently fishing a deep sand pit and doing well casting singles to jumpers. Need some advice when approaching the autumnal months regarding the application of bait into the depths.
Well, I think if you're doing well casting singles now, that's a good thing. I would start to try and apply some bait. If you're catching on singles, that's great, but I would start trying to apply bait at the end of sessions. If you're fishing frequently, you know, there's like, baiting up with, if you're catching on singles, maybe 2 to 3 kilos of boilies or tiger nuts at the end of the session, just in the vicinity of where you're fishing. And that's if they're well spread, that's a great tactic to come back and fish singles over the top. And I don't think 2 to 3 kilo at the end of a session would be overkill. But what you can do is you can get them really tuned onto whatever it is that you want to be using. Whether it's, if you're using boilies moving into the autumn, your bait choice is critical. And from my sort of experience, what I've seen in the past is a lot of anglers start changing their bait as they go into the autumn. So let's say they've been using a fish meal in the summer, and they start to, as the water gets cold, they start to get a bit nervous that they shouldn't be using fish meals, etc. And that's not really how you want to be thinking. You really want to have confidence that what you've been feeding through the back end of the summer into the autumn will work in the autumn. Because if you've been getting the fish used to that bait, and then I remember I fished at the Essex Manor years ago, loads and loads, and everyone was using cell, and in the summer loads of cell went in there, and then when it came to the autumn, I was literally fishing a cell snowman with a pouch full of 10 millers over the top, and that was just a single. I'd cast out into the silt, just no clips, just for a drop, like dump, that's good, drop the rod, pouch full of 10 millers over the top, and that was enough. You know, those fish were tuned to that bait, and I didn't need loads of bait to get them feeding. Singles are underrated, but at the same time, if I can catapult to it, I generally fish singles at range because I don't want to spom and scare the fish off. But if it's catapult range, I think you can get away with that. You know, like a little pouch full over the top is like, I'd rather have a few baits over it because, again, you're going to get a bit of confidence build up from eating them. But at the same time, if you think you're going to scare them with a spom, if it's like 90 yards out, 100 yards out, then maybe the single's a better option.
Yeah.
And another thing that you can do is a stick. Like if you're, like, I think like PVA sticks and PVA bags, they have a lot more pulling power than a single hook bait at night. I've probably said this on these podcasts before and in the videos that I've done really, really well on single hook baits. But over the years, when I look back, I've not really done very well on single hook baits at night. And I do feel that obviously a pouch buoys is great, but if you can't do that, a PVA bag or a stick, you can just get a little bit more traction.
Cool. Marco has asked an interesting question that I don't think we've had before. Evening all, when using a marker float on quite some distance, is it better to use mono also on the marker rod to mark the spot as the fishing rods have mono on? Finding features requires braid. Finding features though requires braid. So would you ever use mono markering up?
No. But if you were like, basically what you're asking me is the stretch. You're concerned that you found a spot on your braid, you're going to clip up to it with your mono and then not be on the spot. Now, the thinner the mono, the more it will stretch. Like that's what I've found. When I'm using like tapered lines with low diameters, they can be more stretchy than thicker lines. So it depends. Obviously, the range comes into it. But like, so for example, when I was fishing at Grenville, I was doing like for like, you know, on the clip on the fishing rods on the braid and the mono. And if you want to check the accuracy of this, you could cast out a clip with braid, pop the marker float to the surface, and then you could put a marker float with mono on and cast next to the float and pop it to the surface and see what the difference is. If you wanted to, like, because I think there'll be a chance it will be further, like fractionally, you know. But I honestly think if you took 3 foot off of the mono, I think you'd be safe. I don't think it could stretch out more than that. If you're using really thin mono and big leads, it could stretch out more than that. I think you could stretch out even a rod length past. But I think with heavier monos, like thicker line, it's less likely. For a couple, much less likely. So I would check it. If you're concerned and you're using thin mono, I'd clip up with my marker rod on my braid, let the float to the surface, and I'd cast next to it with a mono one and see what it looked like, what the difference is, and make an adjustment from there.
Cool. Right, we've got the last couple of questions, and then we are done. Cameron Neal, when fishing very weedy lakes, could you or would you use solid bags?
I don't very often. I would at shorter ranges, but I wouldn't just cast them into weed beds. I would still want to feel them down to the bottom. They're a tactic that I don't use because I'm not very good at like tying them quickly, but they're lethal. They're when you're casting at showing fish in clear water, single pop-ups are great. But if the water's slightly coloured or it's going to be out there all night, there's no doubt in my mind that the solid bag is much better than a single hook bait. Like much better. And I'm sure I would use them. If I tied the rigs and Rob Burgess tied me 100 of them and I had them sat there in a bucket, I would use them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I would be. Do you know what I mean? I'd be really like. But one of the things I find so frustrating is when you miscast one, and then you reel it in, and it's all half melt. All the PVA is half melted up line, and you're sitting there rubbing it in the towel, and then the next bag's all wet, and it's just.
What's the point?
I just haven't mastered. I haven't mastered it well enough, you know. But I do want to. I might get it rocking at Gigantica this year. For one rod, maybe. Yeah. Depending on what swim I am and how far out I'm fishing, how, you know, if I'm fishing somewhere that's wide open and bare. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it lands 2 foot to the right, 2 foot to the left, and it's fairly short range, I might use bags. Get a few tied up, get them in the bucket and use. But when it's got to be on that tree, perfect. then I'm just more confident in my accuracy. Not in the presentation of it. It's just I can't be miscasting solid bags for the drama that comes with it.
Talking of Gigantica, Stephen Welch is going there in June next year. This is the Road Lake. What would your choice of bait be, i.e. the Cell or Link, or do you have your own preference?
I would use the Link or the ISO fish there in June. I think the water will be warm through because it gets hot there in France, and I just think that big fish love fish meal bait. And yeah, I would probably use either Link. Yeah, I would use the Link or the ISO fish, I think.
Cool. Nick Shaw, when I've used PVA bags in the past, I personally stick 2 nuggets together and sandwich the hook in the middle. Is this too clustered, or will this work for the boat as well? So they're going back to the
bait boat.
Yeah, the bait boat. Yeah.
Yeah. You could stick 2 together. You certainly could. But I do the James Armstrong method, as in I don't cut it in half, but I cut down lengthways down the nugget of it. I cut lengthways halfway down, and it creates like a flap like that. And I just lick and stick it around. I come from the shank towards the point and just close it down very gently. You can use 2 nuggets, but I don't think there's any advantage to doing that.
Cool. Sam Lemon, evening lads. How do you go about reading a baiting situation, i.e. when would you add more bait if you haven't caught anything?
It's a good question, but it's again one of those questions that hasn't got the exact answer. It's based on what you think's going on. Do you remember on those underwater videos that I done at Norton? I would have never known to put more bait out. Do you know what I mean? Never.
Yeah.
Literally, we were just, because we could see on the screen, we were just constantly topping it up.
Yeah.
And because we needed to. But there'll be times when you're fishing when the fish haven't come to you, and the bait will just be sitting there. And if you'd constantly topped up, you'd end up with a mountain there. So it is a really, really hard question to answer. I would say that if there's been activity in your swim, and you've not caught, then a little top up can be a good idea.
If you don't have that hard, for that, 100% knowledge that bait has been taken.
And then when you top up, I would say you had no sign. Let's just say on your first night on a venue, you've gone in with 20 spoms, right? And you've got 2 rods on the spot. You wake up in the morning, you haven't caught anything. When I recast, I might put out 5 or 6 more, because then worst case it's all still there, and I've only put 5 or 6 on top. But if I've been cleaned out, I've still got some there. So if I'm topping up without having action, I'd always go a little bit, like 3 or 4 accurate spoms is enough. If there's fish in the area, a lot of times you don't need more bait than that. So like a top up could be 3 or 4 spoms, and then you're not overdoing it.
Yeah. But like you say, keeping an eye on literally everything. Like when we were out with Stokesy last week, now on the Manor you can use a boat because of the weed, etc. He's been doing that for quite a while. But we went out in the boat, and he put his little camera down, and he could see there was no bait there.
So you see that being cleared out.
Yeah. So he can put more bait out, but obviously you can't do that all the time.
Yeah.
But he's also looking at another spot which he didn't go and put the camera out, and it was because the birds were still diving down, highly likely on the bait that was there. So he knows because of those birds. So it's it's important to also factor in not just fish activity.
That's a really good point. That's so another scenario can be that you're seeing birds diving on your bait.
Yeah. And
you now know that you haven't got the amount of bait in your swim that you did originally.
Yeah.
So topping it up as a result of bird activity is there's still bait there because they're diving on it.
Yeah.
But they are eating it. So you can apply a bit more.
Yeah.
Especially on dark. It's a good time just to
So just keep your eyes on it, I guess. Where were we? Leon has asked, I've noticed you still pull your braided loop through the through a pinhole in the new kickers for the slip D? Is that just something you're used to doing?
Yeah, it's called an aligner liner, and it's a rig tweak that Jim Gibbison sort of first talked about many years ago. It's nothing new. It was originally designed to help the hook turn over more aggressively. I think it does do that to a certain degree, not massively, but to a certain degree. And because I've used it for a long time like that and been successful, I always have. You don't necessarily have to, but I think it's another little percent. I think it's another thing that adds to the effectiveness of the kickers and the rig.
Beautiful. Right, I think we've got 2 questions left. We've got Steve the Mid from Stevenage Bait and Tackle. He has asked, fishing a lake with 120 fish in it, with 90 of them being 30 pound, loads of weed, very shallow. How would you start, and what type of rigs going in 2 weeks in July?
Now it depends. The rigs are determined by the lake bed, as in what you're fishing over. Is it clear? Are you fishing on silt, gravel, sand, clay, mud? Or are you fishing on low-lying weed? Now, if you're fishing on clean bottom, now I would always fish my combi multi-rig. So that's the rig that I use when the bottom is clean and I want to fish on the bottom, then I'll fish the combi multi-rig. If the bottom has debris, then I'll be more inclined to use a stiff hinge rig or a chod rig. Generally, a stiff hinge rig is what I use. And I'm not against using stiff hinge rigs on clean bottom if I think using a pop-up is an edge, but generally these days, if I can find a clear spot, I prefer to fish on the bottom, especially summer, autumn time, and I always do that with combi multi-rig. And so what was rig and bait was the
where is it? Rigs and bait. Start what type of rigs?
So the rigs, they're the 2 rigs that I use for 90% of my fishing. I use the combi multi rig for fishing the bottom, stiff hinge rig for fishing pop-ups. Occasionally I'll use a zig rig if I think it's necessary, or sometimes, very rarely, I use a solid bag. But they're I've got a handful of rigs maximum, and they don't tend to change. With regards to bait, I'm someone that uses all types of bait, and the bait choice is always determined by what the nuisance fish situation is, how many carp are in the lake. A lot of the time, boilies and tigers are my probably go-to. They're the normal baits that I use to avoid catching nuisance fish the most. Like bream and tench are a big problem, roach, etc. And if they're present in any numbers, then I tend to fish either boilies or tigers. Now, as you move into autumn, sometimes the coarse fish can become less active, and in that situation, if I can get away with it, casters and maggots are my 2 favourite alternative baits. Sweet corn is the other, but yeah, I'm not talking anything revolutionary here. If there's loads of bird life, if it's shallow, if you're talking that there's loads of bird life and it's shallow, then tiger nuts and hemp can be a brilliant combo, or boilie crumb to stop the birds absolutely annihilating it. And I really like using boilie crumb that's soaked in either hemp juice or tiger nut juice or Cell Smart liquid. They're all things that I've done to great success. But if the water's shallow and the birds are a problem, then hemp and tigers, straight tigers if the nuisance fish are a problem. And as you move into the colder weather, maggots if you can get away with them, casters, and sweet corn if the birds aren't too much of a problem. Sweet corn's brilliant as well.
Beautiful. Good luck when you go. Right, last question is from Terry Goddard. Evening, guys. New to carp angling. Have followed Pecky's multi-combi rig. Been fishing on my local day ticket and getting 3 to 4 bleeps and then nothing. Set up 4-ounce running rig, back lead as well.
3 or 4 bleeps doesn't mean that a fish has picked up your bait. And I would say that most of the time that it's because something has bumped the line between you. I know you're using back leads, but it doesn't mean that a fish can't bump your line, because if the bottom was perfectly flat between you and the spot, even the fish's nose when a fish is feeding on the bottom can give you bleeps. It could be feeding, bump into your line, give you some bleeps. On another scenario, your line might be going up to some weed and then running through mid-air, mid-water, to your spot, and the fish can bump into it again like that. So bleeps are generally fish bumping the line. Not necessarily carp. Can be striking. It can be tench. It could be eels. It can be anything. But you can have a situation where you get what we call done, where a fish picks up your rig, momentarily gets hooked, and manages to shake the rig free and leave the swim. Now those getting done, they tend to be more abrupt. Line bites tend to be slower, and the bobbin tends to fall back to where it originally was. Whereas aborted takes can be violent, as a fish shakes its head and it's just, and it's off. But yeah, I don't think that happens. I think it does happen, but I think most of the bleeps that you're probably getting are from fish bumping into the line.
That's it.
Yeah.
We are done. An hour and a half that's
very good.
a long live.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it, ladies and gents, and thank you for joining us once again. Obviously, we do these each and every month, so join us again next time. And thank you.
The next one's the 50th as well.
The 50th ever.
50th live.
There you go.
Yeah. So we'll see you.
Maybe
in
we'll give
August.
something away for the old 50th.
Well, I'll let you work that out.
Yeah.
You can have a think.
Have a little think about that.
All right. We'll see you in August.
All right. Thank you very much.